This is Will Tchakirides interviewing Dr. Karsonya Whitehead for the HBCU Radio Preservation Project. It is 12:45 p.m. on December 3rd, 2025, and this interview is being recorded at WEAA FM 88.9 in Baltimore, Maryland. All right, how are you doing today, Dr. K?
I'm doing well. Thank you so much for inviting me to sit down to have this very important conversation.
So the first thing I'm just going to ask is to give me a sense of where you're from. So when you were born and where you come from.
It's a really both simple and complex question. When you start to think about who you are and where you're from and what are the places that have shaped you into the person that you are. I always start with trying to make it as simple as possible. I'm from Columbia, South Carolina. I am a descendant of enslaved people from the backwoods of Olar, South Carolina. I was raised between South Carolina in the summer and Washington, D.C. in the fall. Washington, D.C., Chocolate City, the home of Mayor Marion Barry. My father's a pastor and had a church there. So it was very interesting to move from the racist red clay woods of South Carolina into Chocolate City. But it helped to shape me because I was able to both experience what I call the backside ugliness of America, having been called the N-word for the first time at the age of 7, having to understand that there are reasons why my great-grandfather couldn't go to town by himself in Olar, South Carolina, having to understand what it meant when my grandmother wouldn't let us walk to the store by ourselves after a certain hour on Saturday afternoons because of the number of young white guys in those white tank tops driving their pickup trucks and speeding along the road and throwing bottles at black people who were walking to and fro from the store, but then being able to go into D.C. where my entire community was black. You know, my church and the store owners and the restaurants, everybody was black and was somebody in D.C. So it gave me a chance to experience both sides of what America was and what it could be.
Wow, you're giving me a lot to chew on here. So where in D.C.? What neighborhood?
I grew up in both Northeast D.C., which is kind of my home area. It makes me smile because I was recently in Washington and I wanted to go back. Because sometimes you have to go back in order to understand how you move forward, pretty much along the Sankofa bird idea that you move forward, but you keep one eye turned towards what the past used to be and how it shaped you. So I rode over to my old neighborhoods over in Northeast, over on 535 Edgewood Street, which seemed bigger when I was younger, but it also seemed richer when I was younger. To go into the community now and realize that we were actually struggling back then. I didn't see it then, but I see it now.
Tell me more about how Northeast has changed. It is very different. Even in just 10 years, it looks extremely different.
It is very different. We were over in the area where I grew up, not too far from high school, McKinley Tech, but Edgewood Street, it's nothing but projects. The entire street is nothing but projects. At the time, they were just beautiful apartment buildings, which is what I thought they were. When I did more research, they were actually, Section 8 rent control places. But we didn't see that in our home. Northeast, like Washington, has completely shifted. Growing up, it was, of course, some people dubbed it the murder capital of the world. You're talking about the influx of drugs. What does it mean to be struggling in a city that even though everybody's black, there's a huge dichotomy between those who have and those who don't? What does it mean to not be a part of the political power structure in Washington, D.C.? And even growing up, there was an ongoing joke among my father and his friends that, white people wanted D.C. back. Like, that was the thing. It's like, they're going to get D.C. back. You're not going to recognize this. Buy property in D.C. because D.C. is going to greatly shift. And when I go back now, that is absolutely the truth. Washington, D.C. is greatly gentrified, and they have done an incredible job with displacing black folks out of their home community. So although Edgewood was and is a low-income community, seeing it with different eyes, seeing it with an understanding of the intersection of race and class, and being able to see what happens when community communities get gentrified and other communities are intentionally left behind. Like that's the moment that I realized that it was something deeper than just my parents' political and economic situation at play.
Yeah, and let's talk more about your family. I want to learn more about the people who raised you, but I want to frame it in this way, as you say in one of your books. What does it mean to be the descendant of people who chose to survive?
Oh, thank you for that, because that is something that I have worked to instill in my sons. I have 2 sons, 24 and 23. And one of the things that we used to talk about when my husband and I would take him down south, he's from North Carolina, is trying to help them understand that even within an incredible difficult situation, there's always choice. And there's always a choice you need to make about how you're going to go forward. Enslaved people, even though we're taught that they did not have autonomy, that they were voiceless, that they were nameless. That is white supremacy at work, to try to strip the history, the legacy, and the incredible tenacious courage that it took for people to come into a land that was not their own, to quickly have to learn the language, to have to adjust to being free yesterday and enslaved today. And I say that in a shortened way, knowing, of course, you have the 6 to 12-week period coming on the slave ship, so it's not necessarily today and yesterday, but understanding that it was an incredible shift from their own situation. So we would go and travel down to Smoke, South Carolina, and this is an incredible part of my mother's legacy, which of course is my legacy. But my mother's family is one of the few families in South Carolina that received their 40 acres, the mule, and the $50.
Yeah, they had the farm.
They had the farm, and they received it early on. But it is swampland. And it is heir property in a sense that it doesn't belong to anyone. It belongs to all of us. And so taking my sons down to Smoke, South Carolina, taking them down to the 40 acres, there's cotton growing on these 40 acres, and picking cotton with my sons and saying, when slavery ended, on one part of your family's legacy, just talking about the maternal side, not my husband's side, but on one part, which is my daddy's part, they were able to purchase the farm, and they grew up on this farm. On your mother's side, the maternal side, they received 40 acres. They couldn't do much with it, but it has remained in the family since then. So when you pick this cotton, pick it knowing that you come from people that could have chosen to end it, could have chosen to lay their life down, but they chose to survive, knowing that one day freedom was going to come. I mean, they knew they were probably not going to be here when it got here, but that by just holding on, somebody was going to be able to experience. So you're standing here knowing that you're standing perhaps at the exact same spot that the last enslaved people in our family stood, hoping and wishing and praying for freedom for you. And this is that moment that we've come full circle.
Yeah. That lesson that, we may not experience freedom or liberation today, but that we pass it on to the next generation and they fight for it. And this tension between joy and pain that I think is a theme, in your work, I'm really struck by that because, it's there's resiliency. There's resiliency and joy within struggle. And you make that really clear. So I'm curious, what types of stories of joy and pain would your grandmother or your grandfather talk to you about as you're visiting and you're heading south to South Carolina?
This is probably one of my favorite topics to talk about because I come from a line of storytellers. I also come from a line of writers. So I was taught early on by my mother, probably because I talked a lot as a child, who gave me a journal and a pencil early on in my life and said, write it down. If you hear something and it stops you in your tracks, write it down. If you have a thought and you're thinking, this is the one that's going to change the world, write it down. So I've been keeping journals since I was, 12 years old? And they're all here. And I've told my boys, burn them when I'm gone. You don't want to see that all I talked about when I was 17 and there's a boy I was in love with. But I wrote everything down. So I would listen to my grandparents and I would write the stories down in the evening. And so on my mother's side of the family, I was very close to my Nana. She's since run on ahead to see how the end is going to be. And my Nana would speak, I guess, in parables and songs. I mean, she was one of the first black nurses in South Carolina, and she worked in the colored wing of the main hospital in Columbia. And because she was a pediatric nurse, and really at that time, as a nurse, you helped everybody from those who were on their way on home, the elderly, to those who were coming into the world. You worked both ends of the spectrum. But at this particular hospital, they only had one pediatric doctor, a white man who lived in Columbia. And he kept a list of black families that owed him money. And if you were in labor or you were having any difficulties with pregnancy, if your name was on that list, he would not go in. And so they learned to call my grandmother, which is incredible because it's also telling you a little bit about like the economic situation of my mother's family. Because for that to happen, then you automatically can understand they had two things going for them. One, they had a phone in the house, which was incredible because in a lot of homes in the South, there would be one person on the block with a phone, or there would be the corner store with a phone, and you just call that phone, they'd run down and get you to come get your call. She had to have a phone in the home because calls would come through in the night. They also had a car, which was also unusual because she had to be able to get back and forth to the hospital at a moment's notice if somebody was in birth. So my Nana birthed a lot of babies because the white doctor wouldn't go in. So she was known in South Carolina, in Columbia, South Carolina, for the incredible work that she did. She would teach me stories because in addition to laying hands on people, and she would talk about what it means to take her hands and help to shape new life, that the first human touch that a born child had was hers because it was into her hands that they first experienced something other than the womb. And she said those hands needed to be hands of love and care and nurture because that's the first thing that they felt. She was also one of the early nurses that did not believe in smacking a child. When the guy's like, she's like, the first thing you shouldn't experience shouldn't be pain. Like there should be a way that we can cut the cord, rub your back, give you a burp, do things to help you along with that first breath. That doesn't have to be the first moment out of the most secure place you've ever been, has to be one of pain. So she taught me what that meant. She would tell me that both her and my grandfather used their hands in very different ways, but both of them used their hands to build. So she was building the next generation by helping to birth babies. My grandfather used to lay down tracks for the railroad, and he would take me out into the tracks. It would be me and the other, of course, kids, the other grandkids. I have no idea what they were doing. I was walking beside him. I mean, when I was younger, I thought he was like 8 feet tall, right?
Did you have siblings?
I do.
Okay.
I have 2 sisters and a brother. There'd be a whole bunch of cousins there, but in my vision, I'm like, I don't remember you ever being there. I'm sure they were there. It was just me and him, right?
Okay.
But they were like, no, we were all there. I'm like, well, what were you doing? I know I was walking lockstep beside him, and they were playing. You can run on the tracks because at that time he knew when the trains were coming through, so he would take us when you would have the schedule. But I remember him saying to us, and I only heard it to me, but he was talking to all of us, but that he was laying railroad tracks for places he would never go. But he was laying them for us. And that, one day we would be able to go places that he would never be able to go, and that we should always take a piece of him with us.
He would say that?
He would say that. And my grandfather, like I said, he was like 8 feet tall when I was younger. Yeah. And the older I got, the shorter he got. But my Didi, which is what we called him, was just a wise man. He was a talkative man, which was very unlike my father's father, who didn't talk a lot. He was a farmer, so he also built with his hands. But my Didi and my Nana would talk, and I would just go and sit and listen to their stories about what it meant for them to raise 8 children in a home that only had 3 bedrooms, and what that was like to have 4 boys and 4 girls, and the work that they did to get the family through. On my father's side, they still lived on the farm. So my Nana and Dee Dee, of course, lived in the city of Columbia, right? Big house in Columbia. My grandma and Grandpa Anderson lived on a farm in Lexington. And so you would have to take a dirt road to get down to the farm. The dirt road, we would sleep on the way. You would always wake up when you get on the dirt road because it just had such deep crevices. This whole ride would just go up and down to get down to the house and the farm that set like at the end of this path. But the property was all theirs. And so outside of the house, you had all these woods, and there were pathways through the woods because there was a lake on the property. And my grandma was a fisher. And so she would take me down to the lake to go fishing because she said I talked so much that I needed to go fishing with her just so I can learn how to like be quiet and listen. And so she would buy me those paint by number sets, and like we'd sit in the boat, and she's like, this is what you have to work on. But my grandmother taught me the skills of what it meant to be patient, what it meant to wait for things to come to you. And then she taught me how to shoot a pig because that was like a big thing, right? Because she's like, you get too attached to stuff. And this pig you're attached to, that is dinner for Christmas. And I remember of her like showing me how to steady the rifle. I'm like, what is happening here? And she's like, you got to learn how to detach with love. It's an incredible moment. But those are the periods of joy of just being able to experience both sides of grandparents who were educated and were able to turn that education over into a certain amount of financial security. Because my Nana, not in addition to being one of the first Black nurses, helped to integrate an all-girls private school down there. So she went and did that very early. But you juxtapose that to my grandpa and grandma Anderson, who were dirt poor, had very little education, but kept this farm. And they were able to sell their wares, and they were able to keep going. That's the barefoot, dirt floor, everybody's coming in, nobody locks the door, versus Nana's house where you had to get dressed for breakfast because nobody's coming to breakfast in pajamas. So those are some of the stories of joy of just experiencing their lives from their perspectives and realizing I think that is probably why I could sit with both kings and people that are working for the kings, because I had grandparents who did both, that taught me early on that it's not about what you have, it's about how you treat the people around you.
Yeah, I like that politic, but along those lines, how did they relate to the world? Your entire family, how did they relate to the world politically? And what did you learn about race and politics in America from your family growing up?
So I'll split that into 3 parts because Grandma and Grandpa Anderson never talked about voting. I know my grandma had tried to vote and was met with such violence that I don't think she went back because it was never a time when they were like, this is a year we have to vote, the president's important. Like, they were very insular. Like, what they had to do is protect the farm, protect the property, make sure that they could eat, and make sure that the kids could eat. Like, that was a thing. And they didn't have much contact with white folks. Like, they would go in to sell their wares, but that they spent their time on the farm. They spent their time at their lake. They spent their time running through their woods. Like that was just kind of an oasis. So we didn't spend too much time even in town. Like, we would take the Saturday morning trip to go and exchange some of the wares for groceries, but like, they were growing things. Like, they were growing all the vegetables. They had chickens. They had cows that would milk. They had everything they needed. So they had very little contact with the world. But Nana and Dee Dee were very political. And they were very concerned about local politics. And Nana voted. And the first time she tried to vote, she was met with violence, but she kept showing up. And she's like, it is my right. it is my right. And I'm like, Nana, she's like, yeah, this is my right. And even if I get in there, and she would jokingly say something along the lines of, even if I get in there and write your name, and if I write my name, doesn't matter. I have a right to do this as a citizen. And you have to remind people what you have the right to do. And if you have the right to do something, then you stand up and you do it. Even if you don't want to, you have to stand up and do it. That's kind of this section with them, but it's with my parents. Because remember, I'm only in South Carolina over the summer. That's not election time. Mm-hmm. Although there was kind of always this fever during election years. But my parents, my dad in particular, was extremely politically active in Washington, D.C. D.C. was a political mecca. I mean, my dad was close friends with Marion Barry, close friends with Jesse Jackson, close friends with Walter Fauntroy, close friends with Eleanor Holmes Norton. These are all the black folks who were moving and shaking in D.C. because he was a pastor of New Bethel. It was a huge church in D.C., 10 blocks from the White House. My dad was also the head of the Masons in D.C. There's a huge Masonic branch, and I would jokingly call him the Grand Poobah, but like he was the main person. So in addition to running a big church, pastoring a big church, he also was the head of the Masons. So we would have these people at our house all the time. If I needed a summer job, my dad was calling up Mayor Barry, like, hey, Karsonya needs a job. He was calling up Walter Fauntroy, hey, what can Karsonya do? When I was at Lincoln University, Pennsylvania, when Jesse Jackson came to campus, I called my dad and said, hey, I'm leaving campus to go with Reverend Jesse to go down south to help him campaign. And he's like, yeah, I told him to get you because I knew that you would go. Like, this is what you're supposed to do. So we were very politically active as a family, even when I was young, going to the polls with my parents, understanding that we have to get people registered to vote, going with my dad as he's going around the communities. It was not hard in D.C. because Marion Barry was just getting elected over and over again, right? He was truly the mayor for life. But making sure that people understood, even early on, that all politics are local. Now, that is not something my dad said. Some people said that Tip O'Neill's the first one that said, I think it goes back deeper than that. People understand local politics. If black folks didn't understand anything else, it's whoever the mayor is going to determine whether or not you can vote, or whoever the governor is going to determine whether or not you're going to be safe. So I think they understood that. And my dad made sure that politics was part of our conversation. I ran for office in my school. I always lost. But I kept running because my dad was like, as a student, I would always run for some office. He's like, but losing is part of it. It doesn't matter if you lose. Are you getting your ideas out into the ecosystem? Because if the ideas take hold, it doesn't matter if you're not the one to bring them through. Sometimes you water, sometimes you plant, sometimes you're around to see it when it comes and takes root. But that's not your job to figure out which role you have.
Yeah. Now, D.C., Chocolate City, majority black at the time, but only recently did home rule become a thing in 73, right? And so it's an interesting political situation, right, where it's almost like you're empowered, but there's almost also a sense of powerlessness. So I'm just curious, like, how your family navigated that and sort of what D.C. politics was like in that sense.
If you go back to 73, 72, I don't remember. I'm in that sense of my age, like there was never a time we weren't talking about home rule in D.C. There was never a time when they were like, no taxation without representation. Like that's my childhood. D.C. should be a state. As I said, Eleanor Holmes Norton came to my wedding. That's how well I knew her. So I was around her even in elementary, middle school. She's always been about D.C. rule. Marion Barry said it. Like if D.C. doesn't become a state, we're never going to have complete control. He used to say something around the fact that if the government wanted to, some of the president, if they wanted to, they could just take over D.C. And they thought he was talking crazy. And of course, now we actually see, and not that he foretold what was going to come, but we understand that. So I don't remember any conversation from my childhood that did not deal with the fact that D.C. needed to become its own state and that Congress was not going to let that happen because it would mean more black members in the House and more black senators.
And as a student, as a young person, was it clear that writing was the thing, that communicating, that rhetoric, that this was your calling? What did you imagine yourself doing as an adult?
probably what I'm doing now. My dad put me on the stage in his church. I might have been 4. He put a mic in my hand. I think I had to recite the books of the Bible. Or, I'm not even quite sure. I just remember standing up there. My parents, my mom, my dad, my grandparents, everybody learned and everybody knew or everybody accepted that my gift was speaking. It was, I don't know what conversations were had about that. I just know that everyone accepted it, and every opportunity that was available, my parents put me on the stage. So my dad would do it during the church. Take this, do this, read a scripture, say the books of the Bible, make the announcements. So I'm always at the mic. My mom worked for the United Planet Organization, UPO. So when we arrived in D.C., I think I might have been 2 or 3 years old from South Carolina. And my mom had heard about Head Start. And she's like, we need to put, Karsonya in Head Start. I have an older sister. She said, but we got to put Karsonya in Head Start. There was no Head Start in Southeast because we arrived in D.C. in Southeast. Mm-hmm. And she said, why is there no Head Start here? And she started doing research. And she contacted the main branch of Head Start. And they said something akin to, if you want a Head Start there in Southeast, you need to start it. If you start it, we'll come in and help you. Something along that lines. But my mom opened up a Head Start in Southeast for me to attend.
Can I ask where?
We were over in Southeast D.C., and I do not know the exact address. I am going to ask her. That's a very good question.
Would it be in Anacostia or around?
It's not too far from Anacostia, about 20 minutes from Anacostia. Okay. It was a wonderful development because we lived on the second floor. I only know this because my sister reminded me. We lived on the second floor of an apartment that had 2 floors in it. And I'm like, we had money way back in the day that our beds were upset. But she started the Head Start over there about 20 minutes from Anacostia because I think it's still there. Mm-hmm. She went in to have a meeting with Head Start as a result of that. And they opened up a branch called the United Planning Organization. They brought my mom in, and her job was to help open Head Starts in economically challenged communities around the country. So her job started with her opening a Head Start for me, which I think is a way that kind of helps me to frame what I see and how I understand that my parents advocated. So she would have conferences every year. They would bring in mothers, who were trying to learn how to work with their children through the Women in the WIC program. They were doing that. They were giving out the government cheese. They were giving out the powdered milk. So they would have, bring eggs. So she was also feeding the community through all this government funding, both local and, of course, federal government funding, to make sure that low-income households, single mother-led households were getting the food that they needed. Mm. And when she would have conferences, she would let me read a poem because I used to write poetry all the time. And she's like, oh, well, we'll put you on and you can read a poem and we'll give you $20 or something. So I started doing that when I would go down to my grandparents' house. My Nana would have programs at the church and they would put me on. And my entire life has been me in front of a microphone or on a stage, sharing my poetry, sharing my writing, sharing my ideas. My first job, the first time I got paid for work, I was 13 years old, and I worked for Teen Talk, which was a radio program with WPFW.
I was going to ask about PFW. Okay, Jazz and Justice, let's go.
Yes, so we were Teen Talk. But I did the entertainment news for Teen Talk. And I remember having to catch the bus to go down to my first job on the radio.
This is your first time on radio?
First time on the radio when I was 13 years old. And they would give me passes to go to things like go-go concerts, like Stacey Lattisaw, all these people who come and sing. And I would have these passes to go in because Teen Talk was a radio show. We won all kinds of awards. It was a radio show produced by teens, for teens, about teens, only teens, right? But that's really how I stayed on the stage. And I don't think that I have ever left. It wasn't until I was coming through college that my Nana said something that I think about all the time. She said, you need to start keeping track of when you speak. She said, every time you give a keynote or a talk, because you're going to do a lot of them, just keep track of them. She said, because when you get to 500, I'm going to dance with you. We're going to dance it out. Not dance it out, but she's like, I'm going to dance with you, because my Nana didn't like to dance. She's like, I'm going to dance with you when you get to 500. And when you get to 1,000, we're going to take a trip out of the country. So you got to keep count. And so I started counting. I think I might have been coming right through college. So I started just kind of keeping a little journal of every time I gave a keynote, every time I gave a talk. I was like, oh, this is great. And just adding numbers up. And I would call her every now and then. Talk to her almost every day. But, every now and then I'd be like, I'm at, 200 or something. She's like, I told you, you get to 500, I'm going to dance. These old legs might not hold up, and I'm going to get up and dance with you. And by that time, my Nana was blind. And she would say, look, you might have to hold my hand, but I'm going to dance. And she passed away before I got to 500. I hit 500 in December of 2019. And I wrote this whole post on Facebook saying, wow, today I give my 500th keynote. And, my Nana told me when I got to 500, like, we would dance and do a whole wonderful dance. And I know that she's dancing up there with me. But when I gave the keynote, I spoke at a school in Washington, D.C. And at the end of my keynote, one of the students came up. They brought flowers. Of course, they always bring flowers. And the student got on the mic and, like, Dr. K, we know that your Nana's not with you. And they cut the music on. They're like, well, we're going to dance it with you. And the entire auditorium of high school students all got up. And they, like, danced with me to celebrate reaching 500 keynotes. So
that's really beautiful.
Yeah. Young people are amazing. And so now I'm excited because I'm moving towards 1,000. And
who are you going to dance with next?
Well, when I get to 1,000, I'm going to take a trip out of the country. My husband and I have been out of the country several times. But I should hit 1,000. I think I'm going to hit 950 at the end of February for the Black History Month luncheon. I'm giving the keynote. And so 50 more. And my husband's like, we're going to go out of the country. I'm like, well, we go out of the country all the time. We got to do something big for 1,000. But it makes me smile.
So you're actually on radio at PFW at 13, but is the radio on in the house? Like, what sounds are you hearing within the household when it comes to music, talk, public affairs, all of that? So
my parents did not play the radio. They would play albums. I mean, this is the days of having, I don't know if it's called the turntop, right? Yeah. We'd have a record player. And my dad had all these albums. So that's when I knew things were happening in the house, because Saturday mornings, it was Tina Turner, Aretha Franklin, that was get up and clean music. Sunday mornings, it was gospel music. And we didn't play music or even have TV during the week. I mean, my dad, as I mentioned, is a pastor. And he's like, not a lot of noise in the house. The 4 kids, because I have 2 sisters and a brother. He's like, it's already really noisy, because we would get up and move around so quickly in the morning. And in the evening, afternoon, you come home, you work. You're doing your homework, you get everything done, and we would have what he called free time, or your time in the evening. And your time for me was always, trying to find a place to write or read, because I read a lot as a child. So there was very little, if any, music or talk radio. We had a car. I don't remember talk radio in the car. I definitely don't remember in the same way my sons will, because I have talk radio playing all the time and they grew up with it. But it was Saturday and Sunday that we mostly had just music, and it was albums.
Wow. So take me through the decision to attend Lincoln and how you were thinking about college and what that experience was like when you got there, when you left home for school.
So I always knew college was the next natural step. My dad instilled that early in us and really, really pushed it in me. My dad's college career was interrupted early on because he joined the military to get out of Lexington, South Carolina. And he served and then went back to school afterwards and went on, of course, because now he has his EDD. But it was, you got to finish so you can go to college. Everything you want to be, college is a place for you. He said, you're so curious and you have so many questions. There is no job that you're going to be able to have that will allow you to just talk to people and ask questions. Because at that time, they could not conceive of me becoming a professor. Like, that was not something that I was told, you can become a college professor. I'm not even sure who ever tell their child that, but that was not something they could conceive. No one ever said that when you grow up, you could become a college professor.
I mean, were they thinking more Black people have occupied the civil service roles in D.C. for such a long time, and was it more a thought of service to the community of some sort, or?
No, to be a lawyer.
Oh, no, okay.
My dad's like, you talk so much, you got to be a lawyer. You talk, you argue, you just have to be a lawyer. You can be, Thurgood Marshall. Like, you can go into the Supreme Court. And sometimes I look back and go, I should have gone and finished law school. But
I didn't mean to narrow your ambition.
No, but that was his thing. Like, you need to go be a lawyer. They didn't put down a lot of jobs on the table. They said, you like to talk, you like to read, you like to write, be a lawyer. It was never, you like to talk, you like to read, you like to ask questions, be a college professor, go be on the radio, go be on TV, be an author. It was never that. And it's just because in their mind, in my dad's mind, he wanted to be a lawyer.
Got it.
And since he couldn't, then he's like, okay, my daughter, you're the one that's going to be a lawyer. My younger sister, you're the mathematician, so you're going to do that, do mathematician work, which I'm not sure what they do. She's now a math professor. My brother, they're like, you like science, so you're going to be a chemist. Like, everyone had a thing. My older sister, you like taking care of people, so you're going to go into nursing, like, your grandmother. Everybody had what they saw as the roles for their life, which is fascinating. My dad always told us, you could go to any college you want, but he was only paying for HBCUs. So you do with that information what you will. So you can go wherever you want. And I narrowed it to 2 schools, to Brown University and to Lincoln. I didn't even know about Lincoln. I knew about Howard because we lived not too far from Howard. I was like, I don't want to go to Howard, not knowing really the legacy of Howard. But I was like, I don't want to go down the street from the house because my dad's going to be right here all the time, because my dad was right there all the time. Like, he was everywhere all the time in D.C. I would be in school, which is, beautiful memories that I've, of course, taken on to my sons. But I would be in school in some little, whatever, play in school or giving a speech in school. And I'd look up and he was right there every single time. I was the editor of the high school newspaper. And every week when the editions came out, my dad would come on to the high school. And it's like, hey, your dad's here again. I'm like, oh, my goodness. He would come into the office to get his copy of the newspaper, because I wrote editorials for the school newspaper. And I'm sitting back, he was there all the time. So I said, you know what? Someone came up to my high school and said, there's a university called Lincoln. It's not far, because I knew I didn't want to go too far from home. And what won me over, she said, Thurgood Marshall graduated from Lincoln. And then she said, we've had 2 presidents to graduate from Lincoln, Kwame Nkrumah and Nnamdi Azikiwe. I was like, oh, I would like to go and visit Lincoln. And I went up. It was a beautiful university, absolutely gorgeous. It was been a stop on the Underground Railroad, oldest HBCU. I was like, okay, so I'll apply to both Lincoln and Brown. And I got into both. But I didn't get any money for Brown, or not enough. And my dad's like, okay, so I guess Lincoln gave me a pretty substantial package to come for their honors program. And so I went to Lincoln, and it is a decision that I've never regretted. It's one I've looked back on with pride, saying, okay, those are my HBCU creds, that it's what my dad told me. The first time we went up to Lincoln, and we were standing on the campus, and the first time we went up is when I decided to go, because he's like, well, we're not going to take a trip if you don't really want to go. So I never even visited Brown. I was just like, I heard Brown is great, it's an Ivy. So when I said yes to Lincoln, my dad, my mom, and I drove up. And I remember this day so well because my dad had a car phone, like those big suitcases with the phone that you talk for like a minute. It was like $40. But he had this suitcase phone. And it was the day that Len Bias died, because, he was coming out of D.C., that whole thing. And the news came on the radio. And so my dad used the suitcase phone to call my brother and wake him up and say, Lynn, bye. I was like, okay, I'm not sure. But that's what stuck out to me as we were driving up to Lincoln. But when we got onto campus and we walked around and we saw, the Thurgood Marshall dorm, we saw the Frederick Douglass dorm, the Lorraine Hansberry dorm, and we were going through and he was talking about the people as we were going. But we got near we were walking around and we ended up back at the big gate that's at the front of the campus. And my dad said, we sat on the bench, he said, okay, take your shoes off. And so I was like, okay. So I took my shoes off. He said, take your socks off too. So I took off my socks and my shoes. And he took off his socks and his shoes. And he stood up and said, this is holy ground. This is holy ground for you. Similar to when Moses was in front of the burning bush and God told Moses, take off your shoes, right? This is holy ground. He said, this is the place where you're going to find out who you are. Like, this is going to be your home. He said, now, if you get here and you don't like it, I ask you to at least give it a year. Give it 1 year. He said, because you're not going to like it in the beginning. Change is never easy. He said, the good thing is that you like change. You embrace change. You lean into change. He said, but give it a year. Give it a year. He said, and see if it's worth you come back. We'll take it year by year. And every year you just have to choose whether or not you want to return. And it was holy ground for me.
4 years later.
4 years later.
No.
Actually 4.5, because I took a year off and went and lived in Kenya.
Right,
I was
right.
like, Dad, I got to go find myself. So
I want to ask you about that, but but describe sort of what that first homecoming was like, and did you pledge, and what was the culture of the campus like at Lincoln?
So Lincoln is a small university, maybe about 3,000 students, so close-knit. I was in the honors program, wasn't sure what I wanted to major, and I changed my major every single week because I didn't know what I wanted to do. I was like, I'm going to be a nurse like my grandmother. Is there a pre-law program? I was just trying it. I'm going to be a doctor. I was just trying everything because I was hungry for knowledge. I was hungry for all the things that college afforded me that I couldn't get at home, which was late night sessions at the basement of the sub, talking about how we're going to change the world. It was figuring out who my friends were and what I wanted to do. I knew that I wanted to pledge. I was like, I really want to pledge, because as soon as we got on campus, a few weeks later, the sororities and fraternities came up on ground. Like, we're, of course, at HBCU, Divine Nine. And so they came up, we were walking in line. I was like, I really want to pledge. Neither one of my parents are members of Greek organizations. I don't have any members of Greek organizations in my family. So I didn't grow up with sorority and fraternity members. I grew up with Masons and Eastern Stars. Mm-hmm. But I knew I wanted to pledge. And you couldn't pledge as a first-year student. And I was still figuring it out. It wasn't until I became a sophomore where I settled down into my major. I knew I wanted to major in history because I wanted to study my people, and I wanted to know, what did it mean to live in the dorm of Lorraine Hansberry? What does it mean to be in the Langston Hughes Poetry Club? Like, what did it mean to be on a campus where Black people who were escaping American slavery stopped there? Because there's a depot near our campus that was actually the stop. And so walking around and just discovering our history, that's what I was able to do. I did not pledge my sophomore year. I tried. I was not accepted onto the line. I didn't pledge until I was a junior. And it was interesting because by that time, lines were in the spring, and I pledged Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated, which was a monumental shift for me to pledge and be online and experience things that under normal circumstances I would have been like, okay, why is this happening? What are we doing? But I had a defiant spirit. It's very, very true. I was so upset that they had rejected me my sophomore year. I mean, I was president of the freshman class. I was, head of the honor society. I was doing all these things on campus. I was, of course, writing for the school newspaper because that was my thing, right? And I was starting to build up my activist creds on campus because we had some run-ins with the KKK. So I was starting to kind of do my thing, right? Starting to get ready to grow locks. Like I was really starting to come into my own. But I was angry that they didn't accept me. I said, how could you tell me no? Like that was my thing. And I called my dad and I was like, I don't know what to do. And he said, you know what? You got to show them. Like, you just have to show them. So when they accepted me my junior year, it's interesting because I wanted to show them. And it became a test of wills. And I was like, you know what? Y'all not going to break me because you should have accepted me last year and you didn't. So now I'm going to show you. I'm going to be exactly who I am. And I was the president of my line. I was number 6. And my line name, which was very fitting, and even to this day, they had a lot of foresight with that. But my line name was Winnie Mandela, alias Shining Star. They're like, because there's only one star in the sky, and you apparently think that is you, which we laugh about today because my line was like, oh my goodness, you are truly Winnie Mandela. Like you have just become your line name. But I pledged in the spring, but by the fall, I was gone because I said, I told my dad I wanted to leave the country. So I didn't really have a chance to experience what it meant to be in a sorority. And then by the time I returned back to campus, all of my folks had graduated. But I was able to kind of connect, but it was a little bit different.
What did you learn in Kenya, looking back on the U.S. from Africa?
So when I spoke to my parents about leaving the country, at that time, neither of my parents had gone abroad. Even though my dad served in the military, I was like, well, you no, because he served in the military and he was based in D.C. Like he was the person, it wasn't that he was doing HR, but he's the person making sure they had enough tissues and ammunition. Like he was doing that kind of in D.C. I was like, so you actually didn't go to the war? No, he served in D.C. So he never traveled. He traveled around the country, the contiguous 48, but he had never gone outside the country. My mom had never traveled abroad. So I was going to be the first one in my family to go not just outside the country, but to go to Africa. I mean, because at that time, we knew there were countries in Africa, but our understanding of Africa was based on oppressive white supremacist ideology, that it was nothing there but just woods and jungles and nothing but, you need to be afraid. But I'm like, I'm going to Kenya and I'm going to go for a year. And my dad, as he always does, would lean in these moments and say that, when you go, you take all of us with you, that you're the one that we're sending back. At the last time we were in Africa, they were loading us onto a boat. So you're going for all of us. And I went down I had to take the trip. So my mom, because that's her, had a big party in South Carolina. So everyone can come say goodbye to me, just in case she doesn't come back. And so my grandfather told me to walk with them. And then we went back out to the train tracks, and he was, giving me lessons about what it means to leave and what does home mean, and how do you find your way back home, and what do you need to take with you to remind you of home. And so
how did it shift your conception of home when you got to Kenya?
Well, Kenya was hard. It was different. When we arrived there, we were learning how to build houses. So we were doing this whole kind of housing project because I was with this study abroad program. So I had 2 different study abroad programs. There's one in the summer, and then when all of them left, I joined another program so I could stay for a year. But we were learning how to build houses, and we were learning how to move through Kenya. We were taking Swahili classes at the University of Nairobi. Wow. And we all lived together over the summer. When the plane landed, I just remember people were clapping. They're like, oh, we made it. Because it just seemed so far away. I felt like we were traveling for a long time to get there. And we stopped in Zambia, and we hung out in there. And it was different because for the other college students with me, this was kind of a 12-week excursion, and then you're back home. for me, it was the beginning of a 1-year trip, right? And I took 2 books with me. I took the Bible. Of course, I was like, I'm going to read it again, Genesis and Revelation. And I took Alice Walker's The Temple of My Familiar, because that was my favorite book at the time. And I had a big, huge backpack. I had my sleeping bag. I had everything I needed to be there and to try to connect. I was allowed by my dad, I could call home once a week. Like, that was it. And we had this kind of system set up where if it was not an emergency, when they go collect call from Karsonya, if it's not an emergency, I should just yell, I love you, and then just hang up, and they won't accept it. If it is an emergency, I'm supposed to say, I need you, or something like that, and then they would accept the call. He's like, we don't have to accept the call just to know you love us, right? So we would do that. I would make my way on Sundays, and I called my parents, I'd call my grandparents, my Nana, and it was the same system. I love you too, we're not accepting the call. And so, but it gave me a chance to hear their voice, to hear my voice. They would send me care packages, which seemed like it would take forever. But before I went to Kenya, I'm telling you, this is bringing back such memories. I had changed my name. I was like, you know what? I no longer am going to be Karsonya Eugenia, because I'm named after my dad. I was like, I'm no longer going to be that. I got to be my own person. And I changed my name to Akila. And like Akila meant like daughter of a prince or something like that. I was like, I'm going to change my name. My name is Akila Fatima, and that's all I'm answering by. And my parents are so funny. They're like, if that's what you want to be called, we will call you Akila. Because they would go with it, right? They would go with it. So my parents called me Akila. I think my brother called me Kiki. I was like, because I am only known as Akila. That was my name. And it was when I was in Kenya, after the first program left, and I began to kind of house hop, and I would find families, which is something I totally would never tell anyone to do today. But I would like find families in like the market, and I'm like, hey, I'm looking for a place to stay. Come stay with us. I was just going from family to family with the idea that I would just be safe. And I was in the mountain area, maybe about 4 or 5 hours outside of Nairobi, near Mount Chimundu. And there were only a couple of houses there. I'd met this woman whose grandmother was blind and needed someone to stay with her to help her, Mama Wangu. And so I was like, oh, I'll do it. I mean, I don't have anything. I'll do that. So I went and stayed with her for a couple of months, and it was her that told me that there's nothing African, she said, about changing your name to an African name. That doesn't make you more African. She said, your name is the first gift that your parents give you. She said, actually, your name is an African name. The fact that your father gave you his name, because my father's Carson and I'm Karsonya, and she said he named you twice because his middle name is Eugenia, your name is Eugenia. Like, you gotta embrace who you are, and you have to grow into your name. And it was there that I changed my name back to Karsonya, just because of her helping me to understand that the Africa of my mind was not the place where I was existing. She's like, you're on the continent of Africa, but you're in Kenya. And no matter how much you try, you will never be Kenyan. You will never be Ghanaian. You are an African American. Like, you have all of this mixed up, and you got to find a way to make sense of it. And so that helped me appreciate America in a different way, because I was definitely like, get out of this country, it's horrible. Not that it's not horrible, and not that we shouldn't get out, but she taught me that there was something worth fighting for here, because it's what Frederick Douglass said, right? That our blood is mixed with the soil of this land. Like, we built this country, and if you build something, you don't just leave it to ruins. You fight for it.
And is this the moment, or is there a specific moment when you realize, I need to educate, I need to be a part of the process of showing truth and light to folks who look like me, perhaps? When was that moment where you decided, I'm going to be a teacher?
So that's, I guess, a moment of enlightenment, maybe when I started to realize that my struggle was not my own, and that part of it is passing on knowledge. My dad would often tell me that I was a natural-born teacher. He said because teachers learn something and they want to tell everybody, even if nobody's listening. Like, you just learn something, because I do. If I learn something, I'm just excited to share it. I'm like, oh, I can't wait to get on the radio and tell people about this new thing that just feels fascinating to me. That really is the heart of my show. But when we were heading to college, when they were going to drop me off, everybody went, right? It was like a caravan, maybe 5 or 6 cars. Like, neighbors went, aunts and uncles went, because I was the first one. I was the first daughter of that generation to go to college. It was like a big thing. And we were on campus at Lorraine Hansberry dorm. And my family is both exciting but can be lazy. So, like, let's just do a line. And, like, let's pass stuff person by person that we will all have to walk back and forth to the car, which was insane, right? The people are moving in, and you have this long line of my people. But I was getting really emotional as someone like, oh, my goodness, my parents are leaving me here, new place. And my dad said, look, I left you something on the bed. He said, give me, about 2 hours or so to get home. And then call me collect, and then we'll open it together. So I left you a gift. I was like, okay, well, this is really exciting. I didn't know what it was. It was some big box on my bed. And so while they were leaving, I didn't cry because I was like, I got this thing. I don't know what's in the box. Like, he took my attention away from them leaving me there to have me instead focus on, like, this new journey. I was like, oh, this is something really new for me. And so I waited. I was like, because you had to get home and no cell phones. I'd wait and to use the phone down the hallway, call, collect. I kept calling, no one was answering. So he finally answered. I was like, I have the box, Dad. He's like, okay, let's open the box. It was this huge, big box. I tore the paper open. I was like, hold on 1 second. Let the phone hang, and I'm picking it up. And so inside this big old box was, of course, right, because that's how the story goes, a smaller box, like a little marble box. I was like, Dad, it's like a little marble box. He said, well, go ahead and take the top off. And I took the top off, and it was empty. And I was like, okay, so, like, why did you leave me an empty box? I was really offended. I was hurt. And I was getting sad. I'm like, because I thought maybe it might have been my grandmother's pearls. I thought it might have been a check. Money is always good. But it was empty. And he said, it may seem empty to you. He said, but in that box is every prayer we've ever prayed for you. Every time we cry, those tears are in the box. Every dream we've ever had, it's in that box. He said, so put that box on your shelf. And when you feel that you're not going to be able to make it, just know we've been praying for you. We prayed long before you got here. It's in that box. And so that box traveled with me, right, through college. I took it with me on the trip. And it was such a joy to be able to pass the box on to my sons. It was like, hey, don't be sad. I left you something on your bed, right? So both of them, have a box. And I was like, to the outside world, it's empty. Yeah. I said, but inside that box, our people who chose to survive, that's in that box. So you can never say that you can't make it because you've already been promised a future because it's already in that box. And I think that was a moment where I realized that my college career in front of me wasn't just for me. It was for trying to carve out places to just keep teaching. Like, that's just part of who I am. I don't have a lot of gifts. I can't sing. I really can't dance at all. I mean, I can't play sports to save my life. But what I have, I can speak and I can write. And that's what I use in everything I do, the ability to do those two things.
Yeah, along those lines. And, we only have so much time, so I'm obviously not going to be able to get into all of your teaching experience. And I know you've been an award-winning teacher. But what I want to know is, and I'm going to try to move us towards radio and media, how does being a teacher allow you to sort of sharpen your insights and to communicate broadly and to a more general audience? How did being a teacher help shape your work, whether it's as a writer in the Afro or hosting Today with Dr. K? Like, what is it about teaching at that level that allows you to be a better communicator?
So I'll just do a quick path because I mentioned that what I can do is I can speak and I can write. And I think speaking and writing is the heart of me as a teacher. I teach in stories. I teach with humor. I teach with love. I teach with patience. I did that when I was a documentary filmmaker in New York. Like when I was producing for MTV, it was how do I tell stories to people? Like who is the person out there that I can most connect with? When I became a documentary filmmaker, I was a documentary filmmaker when 9/11 happened. And it was only 3 days after they shut New York down when I was like, I want to tell the story of the Twin Towers. Like I want to tell about who were the people that built this and how did it make them feel. So like searching out the engineers and like finding the guy whose job it was to cut the lights off every night in the Twin Towers, and he would go floor by floor, and interviewing them for this documentary to like tell a story about what the buildings meant beyond just a place of work, but like as a cultural signifier in New York. Taking that same kind of desire to use speaking and writing, teaching, and reaching the hearts and minds of people. I taught middle school here in Baltimore City. I taught at one of the most persistently dangerous middle schools in Baltimore City, and I used to greet my students every morning and say, "Good morning, geniuses. I go, what can I teach you today?" And I remember the principal said, "You're calling these students geniuses. They're not. I'm not sure what you're saying to them." And I said, they may not be geniuses now, but they will be when I finish with them. And that those 6th, 7th, and 8th grades, because I taught with them the entire time. So I taught them in 6th, 7th, and 8th grade social studies. That they went on to college. They reach out to me now. They still remember being in my class as middle school students way back in 2003, 2004. And then going to get my PhD because I wanted to tell the story of Emily Frances Davis. My girlfriend had found these diaries of this free black woman in the basement of the Pennsylvania Historical Society. They were going in the trash. She's like, "Oh, they're going in the trash. I don't know what's going on. She said, I'm gonna hide them and I'll do copies at night and send them to you." We did not know then that it was the 5th remaining, primary source written by a free black woman. She just thought it was great as diaries. She gave me something to do. I would teach during the daytime, and I would come home and try to transcribe these diaries at night. That's why I quit my job as a teacher. I wanted to go back and get my PhD to tell the story, because when I recognized in one of her entries when she said we was the only colored people in the room, that's the exact quote. I was like, ooh, I'm holding the diary of a black woman, a free black woman. I said, this is like changing everything. And I went off to get my PhD because of those diaries, which became, of course, my first book about Emily Frances Davis. I became a professor. And I'm like, I just want to be able to do that. And it was hard teaching Intro to Com and teaching all these courses that did not connect to what I want to do. It was just difficult. So I began, after Black Lives Matter 1.0 started, I began doing op-eds. And,
when does Black Lives Matter 1.0 start?
2015.
Okay.
So,
okay.
Yeah. So I go back to Market in the Moment when they were talking about Trayvon Martin, and they were talking about George Zimmerman being on trial. It was after the decision with George Zimmerman that it was like, oh my goodness. Before that, some people mark it 2 years earlier when they think about, the actual death, but no one was talking about the death. We didn't have Twitter.
I think about Trayvon. That's right.
Yeah. No one's talking about that until we saw it, and it hit at the moment that people were talking on Facebook. So that's why it exploded, because now we're all connected on this new site on Facebook, and now we're following in real time. But to have 2 young boys, at the age of Tamir Rice, I'm like, what am I doing in the annals of history? If my sons can't get home safe, then none of this matters. And so I began writing op-eds. Like, that was a huge shifting moment in my career, because I said, if I can't speak to a racist in Dundalk or a racist in, backwoods of Mississippi, if I can't talk to them, then none of this matters. So let me write op-eds, because they're going to pick up the paper. They're going to drink their coffee, and they're going to say, let me go around the country. And so I became that shift, the Du Bois shift, where I became a public intellectual.
I'm glad you're talking about it. Keep going on why it matters to be a public intellectual.
I mean, because that was that moment for me when I was like, but I also recognized a little bit what I was giving up. I was like, if I make this shift to being a public intellectual, then there are books on history I'm never going to write. Because once you become a public intellectual, you're not going to be spending 20 hours a week down in the tombs, doing this deep historical analysis, which I love. I had this place of being torn. I started being on the radio every week. There were radio shows inviting me because, not only am I a historian, I can make it plain for people. Like I can talk to a 4-year-old and to somebody who's 94 and make the history plain. So they would call me at WAA all the time, hey, can you come be on this show? Can you do this moment? Can you be a guest? Can you guest host? And it shifted. And so when WAA approached me about doing my own radio show, Today with Dr. K, 7 years ago, I had to go to my university, Loyola, and say, ooh, can I work at another university? Can we set it up? Like they had to redo everything so that I was able to remain, at that time, an associate professor who taught at the university, but who left and came and did a radio show at a different university, going from Loyola to Morgan. And that changed everything for me. Becoming Today with Dr. K, it was not the first year, because the first year I was trying to find my footing, and I was talking about things that didn't matter to me. Beyonce music, or, what Rihanna's doing. Like, I was doing what I thought people do on the radio. And I remember talking to my producer. I'm like, I hate it. Like, I don't care about any of this. I don't care who's wearing what. I don't care who's dating what. I don't care. And the show's not working. And my producer said, well, why don't you just talk about what you want to talk about? I'm like, I want to talk about this book I read. I want to talk about this person I met. I want to talk about just that. I just want to talk to people like we're around the kitchen table, and we're just having a conversation. And that's how the show has really just grown.
I'm going to ask more substantively about the show, but a couple questions. What do you remember about the first time you heard WEAA? And did you listen to it? Did you become a fan of it when you were a teacher in Baltimore?
I was a big fan of the show. I'm not of the shows, actually. I know Sandy Mallory, who was a huge WEAA personality because she was doing the music. There was a guy named Mark Steiner. He was doing public radio, a talk show. Sean Yos, who wrote for the Afro, he had a show in the afternoon. Like, I was fascinated by talk radio, and I would call in if I could and listen to it. So when Beverly Burke, who used to be the news reporter of the morning show, I met Beverly at an event. She's like, oh, you have a great voice. I love the way you talk about history. Why don't you come on when I'm doing the news? And why don't you do a history moment? This was in 2015. She said, you come on, you do a history moment, and we'll just kind of go through, right? Because I was like, oh, that's great. So every month, I just do like a 2-minute spot on the news show in the morning. And that's when other people heard me, and they would start asking me. So I was asked to come to different radio stations around the city. Hey, can you come here? And when anyone asked me to come on the radio, I would do it, because my dad says people are in their cars. And if you can get them in their cars, it's the same thing with your op-ed. You can get that racist. You can get that child. Like, if you can get them in their cars.
It's true. And
you can snag them. You can actually plant a seed. You don't know how it's going to grow, but you can just plant a seed.
And, I know that Dean Emeritus Wickham, Dwight Wickham, played a role in getting you to the station. He's very proud of that when I talked to him briefly. But what was that relationship like? Is he a mentor? And, who were your mentors in the radio field?
So Dean Emeritus Dwayne Wickham was definitely and is a mentor, in terms of helping me to plot out the show, to plan the show, and to build the personality of Dr. K. Because I was not Dr. K before I was on the radio. It was Dr. Whitehead, or people call me K, right? Dr. K, when they wrapped the show around my name and then wrapped my face around where the station was going, it was a defining moment for me. And Dwayne Wickham would say, you have to decide who you're going to be in the city. You can be in the studio and people will never know who you are. He said, you're probably passing radio people all the time. You don't know what they look like because you don't see them. Or you can change that. Like, you actually can kind of push the walls of the studio and the people will know what you look like. Like, you could be Dr. K in the community. I was like, oh, that's really fascinating to be. And so we started doing things. And he supported that. I launched the Itty Bitty Fan Club the second year I was on the radio. And I would go all over the city, and I would invite listeners under the age of 13 to come, and I would read to them for 2 hours every Saturday of the month. I would just do that. So at one point, there were like 60 kids coming. I'm like, there's 60 kids listening. Then I started being on television. Then I started speaking around the city. And so all of a sudden, Dr. K on the radio was Dr. K that you saw at the market, was Dr. K that you saw at the bookstores, Dr. K that you saw on TV. So it became kind of this space in and of itself. And I think the show, 7 years, the show really hit. Because I can mark that moment, I think, when the show moved from being just a radio talk show to being appointment radio. I know when it changed. December of 2019. I have 4 children in total. I have my 2 sons, I have my bonus daughter, and I have an adopted son from South Korea who's been living with us since he was in 9th grade. But I remember Jack called me, and I don't know where he was in California, and he said, Sister K, I gotta go back to South Korea. And I'm like, Jack, why? He's like 28, 29. I was like, why do you gotta go back to South Korea? He said, they're recalling all the South Korean kids who are brought. We have to go back. When you're recalled, you have, like, I don't know anything. I was like, they're recalled. Like, everybody's, his brother was a pilot. Everyone's got to go back. He said, because something is happening in China, and we've got to get back home before they close South Korea. And I was like, what are you talking about? He got back, and he would call us. He's like, there's something happening in Wuhan. He said, so we're buying stuff. I'm like, well, what are you buying? He's like, we're getting masks, we're getting hand sanitizer. I was like, really? So in December 2019 is the first time I mentioned on the radio, I said, something is happening.
It's early.
We need to be ready. We need to start buying things. And so the staff here, they were like, okay, what are you talking about? What is this thing? I said, something's happening in Wuhan. I said, I'm requesting that every day, if I can just do a minute near the end of the show, we got to prepare people. I said, I don't know what it is, but it's coming. So we started in December 20. By January 2020, every day. And so people would complain. People would call the station and complain. Why is she screaming in the radio about this thing? What's going to happen? Why is she scaring us? It's not even in America. She's talking about China. We need to talk about politics here. It was a big deal. And I was saying, buy canned goods, everything Jack told me. Get it. And I'm buying it, sending it to my parents, and people think I'm crazy. The day after Kobe Bryant was killed, we were on the radio, and I was talking about the New York Times. Because the New York Times, on the next day after Kobe Bryant was killed, the big headline above the fold was all about Kobe Bryant, which makes sense, right? Below the fold, in the far left-hand corner, was the first article in an American newspaper on the front cover about COVID-19. And I said, people, it's on the front cover below the fold. And I expanded from 1 minute to 5 minutes every day. And people were angry, but they were buying what I said. So that when it hit full blown, people were calling the station and saying, I got the mask, I got the food, I got the hand sanitizer, because you kept yelling about it. And so I just said, I don't know what's wrong with her, I'm going to buy it. That's when the show moved from being just a radio talk show to appointment radio. And that shifted everything for me. This show is a place, what I call resistance radio. We spent a year doing Project 2025 every day. I was like, every day. I said, so if you listen to this show, by the end of the year, you will understand Project 2025. You will understand Black Lives Matter 2.0, which I mark as beginning with the murder of George Floyd. But this is what we do. It is serious resistance radio.
I was going to ask you what your vision statement is, but I think you just said it. Why does it matter that you're doing this radio show on an HBCU campus? And how does being on an HBCU campus shape your sense of service and your commitment to your community?
I love that I'm here at Morgan State University, that I can sit here on the campus, a historic campus, the jewel of Baltimore City, and this is where my radio show is working and thriving. And then I love the fact that I have an institute at Loyola University. I'm a full professor, which is fascinating since less than 2% of the full professors are Black women. Mm-hmm. But they allowed me to launch an institute and name it after my father. So I have the Carson Institute for Race, Peace, and Social Justice. And I can combine the two because we do things at the institute that connect to the radio, that it becomes this kind of full circle moment that I can come up here to a place and I can use this as my base to speak to not just the city, but to the world. I mean, mm-hmm. Everyone listens to the show. They pick it up on Facebook. They pick it up on WEA.org. That I feel like, my HBCU creds are really kicking in because I can talk from a place knowing I got my Columbia, South Carolina creds. I got my DC creds. I got my Lincoln. All the stuff, all the paths that I've been on in my life have all converged right here at this moment. I'm often asked to run for office. Like I hear that a lot. You should run for mayor. You should run for senator. Run for president. Like I hear all of that. I think this is where I'm supposed to be, particularly now that public radio is under attack. We need to have more spaces where the truth is being taught. And I am committed to doing that, to calling out the truth for as long as I can in this space. I'm like, just because I can point out that your pipes are broken doesn't mean that I'm the one to fix it. Mm. I can tell you that they're broken. I can give you an idea of what a fixed pipe would look like, but I'm not the person to fix it. So yeah, I can tell you what's wrong politically, and I can give you some solutions, but I am not the person who's going to be sitting in my office in a budget meeting for 12. That's just not me. That's just, everybody has to figure out their lane. And you're excited that I'm saying this and I'm giving you hope because I'm also a PK, so I can wrap hope and vision around there. I know the pipes are broken. All I can do right now is talk to you about how you can plug the hole until we can get people in place to fix it.
Yeah. You speak with, I'm a listener from Houston, Texas, and you speak with such empathy to your listeners and to the people who call into the show. You have so much patience for the people that you're talking with. It comes out. Who are the people that you were trying to spotlight from Baltimore's Black Butterfly neighborhoods? Like who is Black Baltimore, and how do you cultivate this relationship with your community of listeners?
So when I started the show, people would call and talk about Baltimore, and I didn't really know. I mean, I live here, but I'm not from here. And I moved through the city without really knowing the impact of the Black Butterfly, which is a uniquely Baltimore term that talks about the economic and racial situation here. One of my listeners challenged me, which became my book, My Mother's Tomorrow. One of my listeners challenged me to, you got to come out and see the city. Like, you got to get on a bus. You got to come because you know nothing about Baltimore, and it's obvious you don't. I was like, oh, I got to do something. So I'm a researcher. So I launched a deep ethnographic study, and I would go over to South Baltimore, East Baltimore, mm-hmm. West Baltimore, get on the bus. I would go to the park, walk by and see people on the porch and talk to them. And there was a woman that I met, and it was in the Poe Community Center. It's not the Poe Homes, which is downtown from here, not too far from Hopkins. Poe Homes didn't have running water. And there were videos of the people in Poe Homes getting water from the water fountains, like using pots and buckets. I mean, it looked like a developing nation. It did not look like what you expect in a developed country. And I know the expectations are different if you're in the backwoods of Mississippi or Arkansas. But Baltimore, like, why are you doing this in Baltimore City? What is happening here? So I went over there and spent time taking water. We set up a whole system through the radio show. I'm using my radio show for good, right? Mm-hmm. Like, bring water, bring this. And we were setting that up so people can get things, because a radio show should be the place when you sound the alarm, we should be there to answer. We belong to the people. And there was a woman there when she was talking about, I said, hey, can I write your story? She said, yes, write your story. Because Dr. K, they act like we're invisible. Tell them we're not invisible. That to me is the charge. My show, whether it is happening from 3 to 6 p.m. or when I do an op-ed or when I go into the schools, because I go into schools all the time. I teach 7th graders how to be backpack journalists, and I get them cameras and equipment, and I'm training them how to tell their own story. If I'm at the community center, if I'm at the store, if I'm leading a No Kings rally because Baltimore City needs someone to lead it, if that's what I'm doing, tell them we're not invisible. That is the purpose of the show. So when someone calls, and I know, I'm like, you have nobody to talk to. You have nobody who's listening. You're being told your voice matters here. Now, you might be talking out of wackadoodle, and I'm like, what are you talking? It doesn't matter. I will give you your time because everybody deserves to be listened to. And then my job as the teacher is to gently help to shape the truth around what you're saying, the truth that is research-based. My listeners know. They do it to me all the time. That is my question. Where did you get this information from? You should be able to ask me on the radio. And they do. They'll call and go, well, you said, where's that from? I should be able to tell you what resource I am using, because radio hosts, I feel sometimes, you just spout off your opinion because you can. No. Where are you getting this from? Mm-hmm. If I have to extrapolate my opinion from the facts, then so do you. And that is how I train my listeners, how we work together. So I have 5-year-olds who will call and go, you said the other day this, that, and the other about parents. My mom is doing this. I've had kids call my show and say, my mom is doing something to me. Let's go to commercial. Let me go and let me talk you through. I've had adults call crying on the phone because, as I tell people in Baltimore City, if nobody else is listening to you, Dr. K is listening. I hear you. I see you. How can I help you?
Mm. And this is the power of Black radio and HBCU radio. So this is public radio, and you alluded to it, before, that public radio is under threat. Why does it matter that we're preserving this history, this HBCU radio history? What is the power of preservation, and why does it matter?
I believe that we are in a moment now, and this is more than just a feeling. The belief is based upon what we're actually seeing around us. History is under attack. Black history is under attack. There is an intentional erasure that's taking place right now around our stories, around our culture, around our people. And it is our job, and it should be our loving responsibility, to preserve the truth about who we are for future generations. I worry not for Gen X, that's me. I mean, I think Gen X is we're just stumbling along trying to figure out how to take care of ourselves. Mm-hmm. I'm not worried about the millennials. They too are just trying to figure. I don't even worry about Gen Z. My sons are Gen Z. Gen Z, the oldest one is 28 now. Gen Z, it's time to get a job and figure it out. Gen Alpha is coming through elementary and the middle school. Not too concerned about Gen Alpha. I'm really worried about Gen Beta. Because the first Gen Beta was born January 1st, 2025. Mm. The reason why I focus on them, because I can meet a 7-year-old, I can't do too much distorting of history, because they've learned history. Like, they have an idea of who I am. Gen Z they were under Barack Obama's presidency. Alpha, they're seeing the world through eyes of diversity. But you change the history, you erase the history, you dismantle the history. It's Gen Beta that will be confused. So what I am arguing and what I believe and why we should preserve is that we have to plant the trees of truth right beside the trees of lies, because that's what they're planting. And then we have to teach children how to choose the path where truth lies so they can walk that path. We're not going to be able to stop them from planting trees of lies, because it's happening every day. The erasure. You go to the Smithsonian website, Black photos are gone, right? The Blacksonian right now, which is our museum, is under attack. Like, they are attacking our history. We plant the trees of truth. And our job is just to make sure that as fast as you're planting, we are planting just as fast. That we should be focused on planting and not trying to strike down that tree. Because the thing is, and I, of course, the granddaughter of a farmer, while I'm planting, if you have to strike down what I'm planting, you're behind me at this point. I'm already planting the 10th tree, and you're still trying to wait for the first one to bloom so you can attack it. No, we got to plant those trees of truth. Keep doing it, and that's the preservation. That's the work we're doing here every day. That's why public radio. That's why HBCUs. That's why Black radio. That's why anybody who is a speaker and seeker of truth. Like, this is actually your moment, because this is what we need to be doing.
What issues matter the most to Today with Dr. K today, right now?
All right. So every day when I think about the show, and I start thinking about Today with Dr. K when I first get up in the morning, I'm like, all right, so what am I talking about today? Like what matters to me today? I know the news. I am inundated by the news. I read the news 24/7. But I think about it. I'm in the gym. I'm like, okay, so I'm listening for stories. I'm checking news sources. I'm listening to people when they send me, because people send me things all the time. My listeners send me story ideas all the time about what is happening. We have 3 things that I'm very interested in today that I know I want to get into. One, I want to continue to raise the alarm over what happened with these boat strikes. I think that people have to be clear that when there is a crack in the wall, you keep hitting the crack. And I think we have a crack in the wall. We have to keep hitting the crack. And the only way we can do it is we hit it with the hammer of truth. So people called my show yesterday and said, oh, can you convince me why we shouldn't be striking boats? It's like, dude, I can lay out all the research for you. I can take you to the well of truth. I cannot make you drink it. Like, if you are refusing to drink from the well of truth, then stay thirsty, right? Because at some point, you drag people, like Plato's theory of the caves, you drag them as far as you can take them. And if they are kicking and screaming, you keep dragging it. At some point, when they are so out of control, you got to let them go. And then work on saving the people that can't be saved. Everybody didn't run away with Harriet. A lot of people knew about it and they chose not to run. Take the ones who are trying to get to the truth. So I want to talk about that. The second thing I really want to get into today, I've talked to my listeners about taking what I call the Woodson Challenge, because we are now 60 days to the first day of February. And February 2026 is really important because it's the century of Black history commemorations, because Dr. Carter G. Woodson launched Negro History Week in 1926. And his organization, ASALA, of course, they're the keepers of Black history. Well, I'm the president of ASALA. So that is actually my job, to like keep, protect, promote, preserve Black history. So I said, look, in preparation for February 2026, we are learning a new Black fact every single day. So yesterday we were talking about Dulles Airport, because people didn't know that Dulles Airport, there was a Black community there of formerly enslaved people, and they used eminent domain and moved them out. And they built the airport over grave sites of Black. So we talked about that yesterday. And we talked about Viola Fletcher, of course, who just recently died. At that time, she was the oldest survivor from the Tulsa race riots. But talking about her last memory of Tulsa was of seeing a white man shoot a Black man in the head and then turning the gun and shooting at her family as they're trying to get out of a town that had burned to the ground. So today we have a new Black fact, and connecting that Black fact to the work and sacrifice of Fannie Lou Hamer. People know that I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, but what did that actually mean from someone who was actually beaten, and every time they beat her, she sang louder? What does it mean to, in the midst of pain, to still hold on to your voice? So that's the second thing I want to talk about. And then the third thing is what I always call my producer's notes, because my producer is always Justina Apollo. She's an Emmy Award-winning producer, but she's always looking for stories. So I always try to save that third story for whatever she thinks is exciting. But when they count me in, and I have a lot of moments of joy, even though I have a lot of anger in my heart for what's happening in America, I am very happy when I hear that 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, like to just open up to what I see as the biggest classroom in the world, to just talk about things that I find to be interesting, intriguing, things I find to be hard, things I don't understand. Like, I'm doing the same thing I did when I was younger. I used to set my doll babies up. I hated dolls, and I don't know why. My dad kept buying them for me. But I used to make them my audience, and I would just talk to them all the time. And I feel like I'm doing the same thing. I just open up the airwaves and I just talk and I just share what I think is interesting. And then there are people, a lot of people, who find it interesting too and just come along for the ride. I'm like, well, let's just talk about what's happening in the world. Let's talk about how we see ourselves. And let's talk about what we can do to make things better. And that's exciting for me.
What hopes and desires are you putting into the box for your boys today?
I have two incredible sons, my husband and I. They're amazing. They're amazing in that they're very accepting of who their mother is. I have to understand that it is not easy being the child of either Dr. Whitehead, who I was before, or Dr. K. It's really hard being the son of Dr. K. Because wherever they go, they run into someone who listens to my show or knows my work, and so it's fun watching them. My oldest got married 2 weeks ago.
Congrats.
And thank you very much. And my youngest is in law school in England. So they have found their way. I think I've always wanted them to be happy, healthy, and whole. That's always been my thing. Now I'm praying that they find their way. I want them to have a spirit of resilience. I want them to know how to find joy. My youngest is going to be the lawyer that my dad wanted, so I'm happy about that. We will get that lawyer in the family. My oldest has a voice, and what I'm trying to do is build up in him the resilience he needs to use his voice in the ways I've used mine. I'm like, there are two pathways you can take to finding yourself. One is a direct path from A to B. That's not the path I took, right? And I know people like that. I want to be a doctor when they're 4. 7th grade, I want to be a doctor. They major in biology. They go on to be a doctor. Here they are, 28, I'm a doctor. That's A to B. That's not me. I said my path was, I took a lot of shortcuts trying to figure out who I am, whether it was backpacking through Kenya, whether it was climbing Mount Kilimanjaro, when I went bungee jumping off the Zambezi River, coming into graduate school, being a filmmaker, working for MTV, being a teacher. I took a lot of pathways. But the interesting thing is I still ended up back where I'm supposed to be, speaking and writing and using the talents I have to talk to anybody who will listen.
One more question before I bring us towards the close. I promise. I know it's a competitive market on radio for Dr. K's services. I know that. But what keeps you at this institution, WEAA? What's special about this place?
That's a very good question, because I do get offers to go to a lot of places. I feel a responsibility to the people of Baltimore. I mean, I'm not sure if that's based in what's happening, but I take very seriously the charge to be the voice of the community. That is the moniker of WEAA. It stands for We Educate African Americans, and I always add, and anyone else who's listening, we're the voice of the community. I don't have to do radio. I'm a full professor at a university. I have an institute named after my dad that I could bury myself in my institute. I have books I want to write, right? I have places I want to go. I have an ice cream flavor, Yeah, so, it's just Tchakirides Brothers, which is a local ice cream shop run by brothers, Tchakirides Brothers, but approached me about doing my own ice cream. So I have the Today with Dr. K, Taste of Freedom.
Can you describe that flavor?
Yes, I will take a little sidetrack and describe Taste of Freedom because it is incredible. It came out at the beginning of October. And the first layer is black cocoa ice cream. And if you've never had black ice cream, it's a disruptor because we've been taught vanilla as the standard. Mm-hmm. So opening up the top and seeing black ice cream with white chocolate chips is really disruptive. But it's so smooth. And so this idea about disruption. The second layer is Madagascar French vanilla. And in Madagascar, French vanilla, the vanilla bean is like gold. And it's this idea of Creole, right, of cultures blending together. And then the final layer is Kenyan coffee bean. And thinking about the Mau Mau resistance in Kenya, it was over the land, over like coffee production. And mixed in the Kenyan coffee beans, we have chunks of brownie. So with the idea that you come through disruption into cultures blending together into this moment of resistance. And so it's called Taste of Freedom, Justice You Can Savor. So
forget Ben and Jerry's. They think they know. They think they know resistance ice cream. I'm going to try this resistance
Taste
ice cream.
of Freedom. Now, unfortunately, Taste of Freedom is off the market. It was only released in October. It comes back out in February. But no worries, because Friday I'm releasing a new flavor called Touch of Freedom. And Touch of Freedom is a blended ice cream, and it's blended with Indonesian vanilla bean, black cocoa ice cream, and Kenyan coffee beans. So they blend together with chips in them, because this idea of what does it mean when we all come and we're more powerful when we come together. So Touch of Freedom is coming out. So there are a lot of things I can do. There are a lot of things I could spend my time doing, but I choose to stop my day every day at 1 o'clock. I'm in my institute working hard, or I'm teaching. I stop at 1. And I turn off, Dr. Whitehead on campus. And I get excited to come right here. Because if I'm going to do radio, then I want to do radio for my people. I want to do radio for communities that feel they have no voice. It matters to me when I'm out and the guy driving the garbage truck will let the window down and go, Dr. K! It matters. Or if I'm in an Uber and the person going, wait a minute, are you Dr. K? Like, that matters to me. And I'm able to do things. I do a walk-in ministry over the summer. I'm telling you, the people, my listeners know, I give up driving at the beginning of the summer and I walk everywhere. I put my backpack on. And my listeners keep water in their car and snacks because they'll see me walking and they'll pull over and give me water because I'm like, you don't know a city until you walk the city. And I walked this city. I tried to walk to the airport and they were like, oh my goodness. I'm like, I'm walking to the airport. Don't think I'm going to make it. But I do these things in the city because I love Baltimore. I love the people of Baltimore. If radio is going to be a job, then that's not what I want to do. I don't want to start a new career. I want radio to be a place where I'm teaching my people. And when I say my people, that is anyone who is committed to the vision of America. It's not about race, class, or gender. Anybody who is committed. This is one of the few shows where I have equal number of listeners that are black and white, that have come from the most economically advantaged, the most economic district. It is cutting quite across the mode. That is exciting to me, that a 4-year-old listens and a 94-year-old listens. That's unusual. And I think that's the secret sauce of the show, is that no matter who you are, where you are, what you have, or what you don't have, there's a home for you right here. There's a part of the conversation that will resonate with you.
Well, you've taken us on a journey, and we're better for it as a project. And the HBCU Radio Preservation Project is greatly honored to have this interview with you and to have your story be a part of our collection and part of our WEAA collection. So I do want to ask you if there's anything about WEAA that we've left out, we haven't talked about in this interview, to give voice to it now.
WEAA was started by a number of black college students, including Representative Kwesi Nfume. He was the first voice heard on the airways, the first one with two-way talk. When January 6th happened, and the young radio hotshot who had gone on to the NAACP was now back in the seat as representative, was in the basement on January 6th. Fearing what was going to happen, they did not know. He got on his phone in the corner, and he called WEAA. And I answered, because I was live on the air. And he was telling us from the basement, with them hiding in the corner, stuff happening upstairs, play-by-play of what was happening. He said, I knew I could only make one phone call. If I'm going to call anywhere, I know the station that's listening is WEAA. That's who we are. When Dr. Fauci wanted to have his first conversation with the Black community about the impact of COVID on the Black community. WAA, Today with Dr. K. Dr. Fauci's first conversation, the first time we were talking to help dispel the rumor that Black folks couldn't get COVID. It was right here. That's who we are. Today with Dr. K. I'm listening. So let's talk COVID. Let's talk about January 6th. Let's talk truth. And we do that. And that's why I love the station so much. Is that if I can be here and we can get Dr. Fauci, that's both the power of the show and the power of the station. Why not use what people argue is a superpower? Use it for good. If we can get them right here, and that means we're not just a small station that's going unheard. People are listening, and people donate. Whether it's a 5-year-old who calls to donate the $1 they have, which I'm always like, oh my goodness, you're giving your $1 because I love your show. Or it's the person who writes a check for $10,000. You do it because you support the things that you love and the things that you need. WAA is needed. And my show, I believe, is appointment radio. And as long as the people support it, I'll do it. I tell people I'll know when it's time to end the show when we do a fund drive and I don't make any money because people will fund what they love. And if we're making money because people are funding, it means that we're needed and people are expected to be there. So you turn the radio on at 3, and as long as I'm healthy, the music starts and I'm right there.
That's very well said, and we're glad you're right there. This is powerful. Dr. K, thank you so much for your time today. It's been a great honor.
Thank you so much.